Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with a number that didn't just surprise me. It completely upended my understanding of how countries usually work. 97%.
It is a staggering statistic.
97% of all land in Papua New Guinea is under customary land ownership. It's not government land.
Right.
It's not private corporate land like you'd see in, I don't know, the US or Europe. It belongs to the people clans, lineages, families who've lived there for centuries.
Which sets the stage for a really fascinating geopolitical problem. Usually when we talk about climate policy, we're talking about governments.
Right, governments acting on government land or regulating private industry.
Exactly, but PNG it throws a wrench in the gears of global policy. Because the government there, they don't own the forest.
So how on earth do you negotiate a massive international climate treaty or, set up a carbon market when the trees belong to thousands of different clans?
Well, that's the question.
Because today we are diving deep into Papua New Guinea's REDD plus framework. And I know framework sounds so dry, but this is actually a high-stakes experiment in integrating global finance with, well, local tradition.
It really is. It's the intersection of high-level carbon markets and hyper-local custom. The mission of the source material we're analyzing today, I mean, we're looking at the benefit-sharing guidelines, the safeguards, all of it.
The whole package.
The whole package is essentially trying to answer one question. How do you empower those customary landholders and local communities, or CLLCs, to be the stewards of the forest in a modern economy?
And get paid for it, presumably.
And get paid for it, precisely. Because without the economics, it's just a nice idea.
But the money is useless without the rights, right?
Yeah.
And the legal structures to back it up.
That's the core tension. If you get the structure wrong, the money could destroy the community. If you get it right, it empowers them.
So we've got a massive roadmap to cover. We're going to look at the who, these customary landholders, and how they organize.
Then the how, the two different roads to selling carbon credits.
We're going to look at the guardrails, and there's a consent rule in here that seems almost impossibly strict.
And finally, we will follow the money, down to the last cent.
Let's start with the who. Because in many parts of the world, if you want to preserve a forest, you lobby the state. In PNG, the state is more like a facilitator, not the landlord.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So the documents keep referring to CLLCs, customary landholders, and local communities. Who are we actually talking about here?
We are talking about clans, lineages, or extended families. Their rights to the land aren't written in a title deed filed in a city basement somewhere.
Right.
They're regulated by custom. It's oral history, it's lineage, it's tradition. And it's incredibly complex because boundaries can shift and histories can be disputed.
Which sounds beautiful, but also a complete nightmare if you're a lawyer trying to sign a binding contract to sell carbon offsets for, say, 30 years.
It is a massive challenge. And that's why the guidelines are so specific about organization.
Oh.
You can't just, shake hands with one guy who claims he's the chief.
So what do they have to do?
The landholders have to organize themselves into legally recognized entities. The most common one mentioned is the ILG.
An ILG. Okay, so that's like forming a corporation for your clan.
Essentially, yes. It gives the clan a legal personality. It lets them sign contracts, open bank accounts. But here is where the guidelines get very prescriptive, and for a good reason.
Oh.
They explicitly warn against fragmentation. They actually recommend exploring options beyond just single-clan ILGs. They suggest multi-clan associations or business groups.
Why push for that? Wouldn't a clan want to keep their business separate? If I own my plot, I want my check. I don't want to share with the clan across the river.
That's the natural instinct, sure. But you have to look at the history of the resource curse in PNG, particularly in mining and forestry.
What happened there?
You fracture the community into tiny, competing legal entities. You just get conflict.
Conflict over boundaries.
Boundaries, royalties, access routes, everything. Think about the mining boom in the 90s. You often had specific families claiming a tiny patch of land to get a royalty check, which pitted cousin against cousin. It tore the social fabric apart.
I see.
So the deep dive here is that this REDD plus framework is trying to engineer social cohesion before the money starts flowing. They are prioritizing ecosystem scale over family scale.
Because nature and peace requires scale. That's a really interesting point. The ecosystem doesn't stop at the edge of one family's plot. You can't conserve half a watershed.
Correct. So they're pushing for these broader, multi-clan groups to ensure stability.
There's another crucial point here that I circled in my notes. It seems to be the linchpin of the whole legal argument. The sources say that carbon rights are inextricably linked to land ownership.
That is the foundation. You cannot separate the two.
So what does that mean in practice?
In some countries, the government can claim the carbon rights, even if you own the land. But in PNG, if you have the customary right to the land, you have the claim to the benefit streams from the carbon sinks.
You own the tree, you own the carbon, it stores.
You got it. So you can't have a foreign company come in and say, we bought the carbon rights from the government while the people are still living on the land.
Not under this framework. The government facilitates, but the underlying asset, the carbon storage capacity, belongs to the CLLCs.
Precisely.
Okay, so we know who owns it. Now, how do they actually get a project going? I was reading through the National REDD Plus Development Guidelines, and it seems like there are two completely different ways to do this.
There are. And this is a really important distinction for anyone trying to understand the market mechanics here.
Yeah.
You have the national jurisdictional approach.
Okay.
And you have the voluntary carbon market, or VCM, approach.
Break this down for me. Is it just the difference in who writes the check?
It's more a difference in scale and regulation. The national jurisdictional approach is the big picture. These are initiatives regulated by international bodies like the UNFCCC.
The big climate conferences?
Right. And they're implemented by government agencies like the Climate Change and Development Authority, or CCDA. This is the country of PNG saying, we as a nation are reducing our emissions.
Okay. And the other road, the VCM.
The VCM, the voluntary carbon market, this is the private sector. This is where you have corporations.
Like an airline or a tech giant?
Exactly. They're looking to buy offsets to meet their own internal net zero goals. These projects are guided by standards like VERA or VCS. They are project scale, specific to a location, and funded by private investment.
But wait, if I'm a private developer doing a VCM project, am I just operating in a vacuum?
No, and that's the key concept here. The guidelines talk about nesting, or a hybrid nested approach.
I saw that term, nesting. It sounds cozy, but I'm guessing it's more about accounting.
It is entirely about accounting. Think of the national approach as a giant bucket representing the whole country's carbon budget.
Okay.
If a private developer runs a project in the highlands and saves 1 million tons of carbon, they can sell those credits to an airline. But, and this is the nesting part, that 1 million tons also has to be subtracted from the country's total bucket.
Ah, I see. Because if you don't do that, you have a problem.
You have a massive problem called double counting. If the project sells the credit to the airline, and the government counts that same reduction toward its Paris Agreement targets, you've sold the same apple twice.
So nesting is just a fancy word for one ledger.
That's it. And the government, specifically the CCDA, acts as the referee. They hold the whistle. They regulate the VCM to ensure the puzzle pieces fit inside the frame.
Okay, so we have the players and we have the game board. Now let's talk about the rules of engagement, because history is full of stories where development happens to communities, not with them. How does this framework prevent someone from just showing up with a contract and, well, tricking a village into signing away their rights?
This brings us to the safeguards. And the biggest one is an acronym you'll see everywhere in human rights law, FPIC.
Free, prior, and informed consent.
It's the gold standard. But the PNG guidelines go into very specific detail on what that actually looks like. It's not just a signature on a page. It is defined as a specific right to give or withhold consent.
Withhold is the powerful word there, the right to say no.
And the right to say no is backed up by a very, very high threshold. The guidelines specify that at least 85% of total adult customary landholders living on the land must understand and give their consent.
85%? I have to be the cynic here. That sounds impossible. I mean, getting 85% of people to agree on pizza toppings is hard.
I know.
In a remote area with limited literacy and complex tribal politics, is setting the bar at 85% actually a way to ensure no projects ever get approved? Is it a bug or a feature?
It's definitely a feature. And it's designed that way because of the stakes. If you proceed with only, say, 51% consent, you have 49% of the community who might be angry.
Almost half the people.
Almost half. And in a customary land setting, that leads to sabotage, it leads to blocking access roads, it leads to the project failing.
So the 85% is basically insurance against civil unrest.
Exactly. If you have 85%, you have a genuine consensus. You have a mandate. Anything less is just too risky for the investor and the community.
And how do they even know who the 85% are? Does someone just go count heads?
It's much more rigorous. It involves a participatory social mapping process. Before a project can even apply for approval, they have to map out exactly who lives there, which clans are involved, where the boundaries are.
And the timing on this matters too, right?
Crucially, the documents say this process, the mapping, the education, the consent, has to happen before any project agreement is signed.
So you can't sign the deal and then figure out the consent later.
No, it shifts the power dynamic. The community has the leverage up front.
I also noticed there's a specific call out for gender, which feels like it might be a point of friction in some of these communities.
It is a massive point of focus. The guidelines are explicit that this isn't just about the male clan leaders. The process requires the inclusion of women, youth, and marginalized groups.
So what does that look like in practice? A gender equality and social inclusion action plan, I think it was called?
It means that if you hold a town hall to get that 85% vote, and only the men are allowed to speak, the government can say invalid. You haven't met the standard.
So it forces the conversation to be broader than just the traditional hierarchy.
It does, which is a massive cultural shift in some areas, I imagine. It's using the carbon market as a lever for social inclusion. It adds time and complexity, but it also adds durability.
Okay, so let's assume everyone agrees. The clans are organized, the project is nested, and 85% of the community said yes, now. Show me the money.
The benefit sharing and distribution guidelines.
Yeah.
The BSD.
I want the breakdown. Because usually this is where the trick happens. $1 of carbon credit is sold. How much actually lands in the pocket of the person guarding the forest?
It depends on which road you took, national or voluntary. Let's look at the national approach first. The guidelines propose a split of 60%.
60% to who?
To the customary landholding communities.
60. And the rest?
20% goes to the subnational government, the provinces and districts that provide local services, and 20% goes to the national government.
That seems reasonably balanced. I mean, the government needs money to run the monitoring systems and all that.
That's the logic. The national government has to pay for the satellite monitoring, the registry, the international reporting. That 20% covers the administrative cost.
Okay, now walk me through the private sector side, the VCM approach, because that's where corporate profits come in.
This is a bit more variable, but the guidelines set clear guardrails here too. The project developer, the private company putting up the capital, takes 30 to 40%.
To cover their costs and profit.
Okay.
And the communities.
The CLLCs get 50 to 60%.
50 to 60. And the government.
In this model, the government steps back. The CCDA gets just 7% for maintaining the safeguards and registry, and subnational agencies get 3%.
So in the private model, the government takes a small regulatory fee, basically. But the key takeaway is that in both models, the majority of the benefit, 50 to 60%, is mandated to go to the people on the ground.
Yes, but here's where we need to be careful. When we say benefits, do we just mean everyone gets a check in the mail?
That's what I would assume, a dividend.
And that is often the expectation, but the guidelines urge caution there. They distinguish between monetary and non-monetary benefits. And frankly, the non-monetary ones are often where the real value lies.
You mean like infrastructure, a school or a well?
Exactly. Building a school, putting in a water catchment system, medical supplies.
But why is that better? If I'm a landholder, wouldn't I prefer the cash to decide for myself?
There's a behavioral economics angle here, and a practical one. If you give a household a cash payout in a remote area with high inflation, that money might vanish on consumables in a week.
It's gone.
It's gone. But if that money builds a water catchment system, it saves the women of the village 3 hours of walking every single day for 20 years.
It converts carbon cash into generational time savings.
That's a great way to put it. It builds community resilience. Whereas cash distributions often lead to disputes. So the benefit sharing plan, the BFP, has to outline this mix. The community has to agree. We want 40% in cash for school fees and 60% into the clinic fund.
Okay, but even with the best plans and even with 85% consent, people are people. Disputes happen.
That's the reality check.
Money goes missing, promises get broken. What happens then? Let's say the 15% who voted no decide to cause trouble, or the developer doesn't build the clinic they promised.
This is why the framework establishes a GRM, a grievance redress mechanism.
Is that just a fancy word for a complaint box?
Yeah, it has to be more than that. Think of it as a pressure valve. In PNG, you often have informal dialogue at the village level, which is good, but lacks enforcement. And then you have the formal court system, which is expensive, slow, and adversarial. The GRM sits in the middle.
So it's an intermediary step.
Yes, it's designed to be accessible and efficient. It allows that 15% of dissenters to be heard without needing to resort to sabotage. It allows a clan to say, hey, our payment is late, without hiring a lawyer in Port Moresby.
And does anyone actually see these complaints, or do they just disappear into a filing cabinet?
That brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the SIS platform.
The Safeguards Information System.
This is the central data hub. It's the brain of the operation. It merges data on FPIC, did they consent? GRM, are they complaining? And benefit sharing, did they get paid?
So it's a transparency engine.
That is the goal. Transparency is the killer app for carbon markets right now, because the global market is plagued by accusations of fraud and phantom credits. The SIS allows the world and the government to track if the safeguards are actually being respected.
It keeps everyone honest because the data is visible.
If the SIS shows a project has high grievances and low benefit payouts, red lights start flashing. It connects the social health of the project to the financial value of the credit.
So what does this all mean? We've got the clans organizing into ILGs, the nesting of national accounts, the 85% consent threshold, the 60% revenue split. When you zoom out, what is PNG actually trying to do here?
They are trying to create what the documents call a responsible economy.
Oh.
But I think it goes deeper than that. This framework is acknowledging a fundamental truth about conservation that the rest of the world is just waking up to.
Which is?
It isn't just about carbon. It is about participatory, sustainable land use planning.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But what it means is letting communities decide. It allows them to say, okay, this valley is for our gardens, this slope is for our cash crops, and this ridge is for the carbon market. It integrates conservation into their livelihood.
Instead of making it something imposed from the outside.
Exactly. It turns the forest from a resource to be plundered for a one-time cash injection into an asset to be managed for the long term.
It feels like a massive bet on local control.
It is. And I want to leave you with one thought on that, something that came up in the guidelines regarding permanence.
Permanence meaning the carbon stays in the trees forever.
Right. The biggest fear in the global carbon market is that you pay for a forest to be saved, and 5 years later it gets cut down anyway. The guidelines suggest that the only way to guarantee permanent reduction of emissions is if the local communities, the 97% owners, are the ones leading the charge.
Because if they own the decision, they'll defend the forest.
That's the theory. If it's their project, they protect it against illegal loggers or encroachers. If it's an outsider's project, it's just an imposition. So the provocative question here is, can this model of high percentage community ownership and rigorous consent become the global standard?
Wow.
If PNG can pull this off with 97% customary land, it proves that you don't need to bypass the people to save the planet. You have to empower them.
That is a powerful thought. The people living in the forest aren't the obstacle to saving it. They are the only mechanism that actually works.
That is the bet PNG is making. And with the strictness of these guidelines, the 85%, the nesting, the safeguards, they are trying to stack the deck in favor of that bet paying off.
Well, I'm certainly going to be watching to see how that bet plays out. It's complicated, it's ambitious, but it might just be the future of conservation. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure.
And to you listening, thanks for sticking with us through the acronyms. Until next time, keep asking questions.